Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Breakthrough Lab podcast. Today is just going to be a solo episode with me, and it is a beautiful sunny day here in Texas. In fact, on Sunday was my nephew's first birthday party on St. Patrick's Day. There was about 30 minutes of sun the entire day. It was raining all weekend. There was a window where it was just like gorgeous sunshine. It was awesome. And in those 30 minutes, I think I was the only person in the entire party that got a sunburn, which is wild because I don't normally get sunburned. And it happened this time. So I think I may be one of the first Texans here in the North Texas area to have gotten a sunburn in March. Hopefully that will be all for the year. So normally my best friend, Taryn, is the one, or my other best friend, Jennifer, they're the ones that get sunburns. But this time it was me. So I took it for the team, y'all. Speaking of that party, I was having a really great conversation with a friend that I hadn't seen in a while. And we got to talking about strengths and specifically about how in our culture, we actually tend to focus more on our weaknesses, right? There's a lot of us that walk around thinking about what is wrong with us instead of what is right with us. So we're getting into this conversation about, how we can actually improve so much more exponentially if we focus on our strengths rather than our weaknesses. One of the things that came to mind for me is that sometimes the things that we think are weaknesses are actually our strengths. For example, that happened to me. There was an assessment I took called Strengths Finder. We were talking at length about this. It's a great assessment. If you haven't taken it, Google it, Strengths Finder. And when I got back my list of strengths, one of the things that was in my top strengths, I forget what the title of it was specifically or what the label they used was, but it was about how I really excel at taking all of these ideas from all these different avenues and connecting them. Something that a lot of people may not be able to do. Like I can just kind of go out and see all of these things across different industries, things that seem like they're not even related. And when I saw that that was one of my strengths, I felt so vindicated and validated because oh my gosh, I do that all the time. I always zoom out on a situation and I start to look for patterns and what could happen and how can I link these things? Or I'll be reading one book and I'll think back to a book I read 3 months ago that was in a completely different thing and I'll link the ideas. And, I used to think that this was a weakness, not necessarily the book and the linking of ideas, but I absolutely thought it was a weakness that, hey, I feel like I'm always wasting time because I'm analyzing all these things and I'm looking for stuff and nobody else thinks this way. And, I think I overthink things and I would just get in my head about this thing. So when I saw that description, and I learned that about myself, it helped me really understand that what I had was a gift. And the fact that nobody else thought that way wasn't because I was wrong. It's because they didn't have that same gift. They didn't have that natural latent ability or even just disposition to want to do that. So I really started owning that strength from that moment forward and learning how to cultivate it because, there can be a dark side to our strengths at times. So what I really wanted to talk to you guys about in this episode is how do we self-discover the things that we may think are weaknesses but are actually our strengths? And going even further than that, how can we actually take things that we think are weaknesses and make them a strength by reframing it? Maybe it's something that we've decided is a weakness, and how can we look at it differently so that we can start focusing more on what's right about us and we can really start stepping into our power instead of feeling stuck all the time or letting that voice inside of our head get to us. And so diving in here, I'll use a personal story here because I think it's relevant, and I think that you guys like to hear about how sometimes Joshua and I are dealing with these things, how we've dealt with these things in our past. So let's just dive in here. So when we think about the things that we tell ourselves that may be our weaknesses, it got me thinking that we have all of these beliefs about ourselves. Maybe we have external things that happen that validate those beliefs to us. Maybe we create stories about why we can't or shouldn't do something. There's so many instances where we hold ourselves back. We focus on those weaknesses and our vulnerabilities. And then what we do is we start to modify our behaviors. We start doing the opposite of what we might actually want to do so that we can hide those things. Sort of like in the story I was telling earlier about how I wanted to hide that piece of me that thought that way because nobody else was doing it. And I thought that there was something wrong with it. And that really got me thinking, what if the things that make us more vulnerable are actually the key to our success? What if the thing that we're trying to hide about ourselves is actually the thing that can make us successful, that can help us connect the dot, that can help us show up more truly like who we want to be? So I want to dive deeper into another personal story here. And that is that I used to be one of those people who thought I needed to hide. I, in fact, held myself back for many years from doing what I wanted to do and really being successful for what my personal definition of success is, because I was afraid that if I was successful, then I would be exposed, right? Like, this is actually a really common fear that I hear from clients a lot, that there's an equal amount of fear of success as there is a fear of failing. Because by succeeding, when you become more visible, when you really show up as yourself, there may be people out there who don't agree with you, who try to expose you, who knew how you used to be and might say, well, that person's a fraud or that person's an imposter. So a lot of that does come back to imposter syndrome as well. So I just wanted to really talk about that here, that you can be just as stuck from having fear of success as you can of having a fear of failure. And for me, that's what it was. I was holding myself back really because I was telling myself stories about what other people would think. Specifically, when I started down this journey, there are people who listen to this podcast who knew the type of person that I used to be. I was not at all the person that I am today. I've changed so much. I've grown so much. But I used to be very irritable. I would have mood swings. I didn't feel well. I was one of those people who went out and partied hard. I mean, you name it. In my youth, I probably did it for a bit. Nothing too crazy, okay? And because I still have relationships with people who knew me at that point, there was a really large part of me that was very hesitant to come out and really step into this role. For example, doing something like this podcast, talking about these things, because I was afraid that once they saw how much I've changed, how much I was really stepping into my own power and being successful, they would just think, this is just an act. It's not real. That's not who she really is. Oh, I remember when she used to do that. And guess what? Maybe they are telling themselves those stories. Maybe they are saying those things. And what did that have to do with me, though? What was I doing by minimizing who I really was? My story that I thought was a weakness, that I came from that and then came to this, I was making that a weakness. I was making that a reason why I wasn't really going 100% and chasing my dream and doing not just my dream, but what I believe is my purpose of helping other people along the path that are ready for bigger things, ready for elevation. And instead, I had to reframe myself into thinking that it's because that I've done those things, it's because I've gone down that path and gotten here, that actually gives me the credibility to do these things, because I had to fight. I had to use all of the techniques, everything that we talk about on this podcast and more are things that I had to do myself, personally experience. So it's not even just about all the training that I've received. It's not even about all the coaching that I've done one-on-one with clients. It's all about, it's also about the experience that I've had. Now, listen very carefully. I knew this at a cognitive level. I did. I sure knew this at a cognitive level that, because I had this experience, that's what made me the perfect person to do this. And yet I still had this fear, because that's how our beliefs work. That's how our brain is set up. I can consciously think and know something or want something to be true. However, because that was buried at the deepest unconscious levels, that programming that I had was what was actually influencing my behavior. So I want you to think about that for a moment. What I was thinking about consciously, what I wanted to be true, what I said was true, wasn't matching up with my behaviors and how I was showing up for years, which is how I knew that there was a discrepancy. Because if it was a real belief that I had, if I was very congruent with, hey, I'm very credible, like it makes me, it's a strength that I went through all of that. And it's exactly what I need to succeed in doing what I need to do. Then I would have absolutely come out and used it as the strength, right? But I wasn't. So for the longest time, it was something that I kept hidden. This strength that I had, this beautiful gem I kept hidden, because consciously I knew that it was a strength, but unconsciously I was really running the opposite program, the one that kept me hidden. So this is why we talk so much about changing our beliefs. This is why awareness is that first step, because what could have happened and did for many years is that I would tell myself, well, I know that this is what I actually feel. This is what I actually believe. And kept on telling myself, well, I don't have this problem. I don't have this problem. Really, the reason I'm not doing it is because of this. Really, the reason I'm not doing it is because of that. Really, the reason, just giving reasons, giving excuses instead of getting the results that I wanted. So the first step, we talk about this a lot, is to become aware that you are even running this pattern, that you have a discrepancy between what you want your reality to be, and what you're actually doing. And that was one of the biggest things that I had to do. I had to really go down and dig deep into the core of realizing, hey, you know what? I do have this thing, and I really want to get over it. And so what do I need to do in order to do that? Now we're looking at, there's so many different techniques you can use for releasing these beliefs. Sometimes all you need is a really, really good reframe. For me, it came in the packaging of going to an event, hearing speakers on stage in front of thousands of people, being real and raw, seeing these people who have been extraordinarily successful doing what I'm doing, sharing stories just like mine, and realizing, oh my gosh, I felt the most connected to them when they shared those things about themselves. And boom, belief completely changed, completely reprogrammed. So sometimes it's about putting yourself in the right environment, around the right people, getting just the right reframe in the right moment in order to be able to do this sort of thing. And so reframing yourself can be so powerful, helping you discover, if you're able to discover that your weakness is actually a strength in a similar way, then how could things really shift for you? How could you show up differently? What is something that people may say about you? So here's some examples of some things. Sometimes people think that they look too young or that they just don't have enough experience. I've heard even, well, I'm a woman and I'm in a man's industry. Or even the opposite, right? Like I'm only man and I'm just surrounded by a bunch of women. There's all sorts of things. You can have beliefs that you're too emotional, or maybe that you're too rational. Whatever it is, these are all examples of things that you may be telling yourself are weaknesses. And what if they're actually a part of your strength? For example, another story here, just for context. I used to get told that I look so young when I was like in my 20s. I was very self-conscious about that. I was always trying to find ways to make myself look older. And eventually I let that go. I was just like, whatever, it just wasn't a thing. Recently, that started happening to me again. I actually had a client call, and it was the first time meeting this person. And we did a Zoom meeting. And the very first thing that she said to me was, oh my gosh, how old are you? I was floored. I was so caught off guard about this because to me, I'm like, how is that even relevant to anything, right? But I had to put myself in her perspective. And some people, many people don't know what this work entails. And they see someone who looks young and they may think, oh my gosh, this person doesn't have a lot of experience. So I was kind of like, wow, do I tell her? Do I not tell her? Like, there's no reason to not tell her. I told her, right? I told her, and then I went on to explain all of the experience that I had, and everything was beautiful. It was great after that. But it's just something that I had to sit with and think about, because then it kept on happening. And so I could have chosen to believe that this was a weakness, that this was something that would hold me back. Or I could choose to make it into a strength, to turn it into a strength. And an example of how I could do that is by saying, you know what? I'm actually closer to my 40s than I am my 20s, but thank you for the compliment. Many people think that I'm in my 20s. And I've actually been leading a very clean lifestyle for a very long time now. I take supplements, we eat organic, we change our water supply, we use filtration. I've been doing skincare since I was in my 20s. So that's probably why I look this way. And in fact, health coaching is something I do. So obviously I know what I'm doing, don't I? That's just an example of a way that I could turn that one thing from a weakness into a strength. And you heard when I just said that I was owning it. I was saying, thank you for that. Thank you for noticing. It's actually something that I've taken and put a lot of work into looking this way, into being this way, into showing up this way. Meditation is another one of the practices that I do that also help you keep looking younger. Now, by no means am I perfect in this regard. And can you start to see how this is something that you could do with something that's going on in your life? Being able to reframe something. And so how do we do this? I want to walk you through an exercise so that you can do this yourself. And it may help even if you do this with a partner. Okay, like if you write something down and you're just like, I simply can't think of a reframe for myself right now, you can absolutely reach out to somebody else if you get stuck on one of these steps and say, hey, here's what's going on. And can you help me? In fact, if you reach out to me, I will help you with this. I will help reframe you. Just email us at hello@the Breakthrough Lab podcast. And I'm more than happy to help you with a reframe if you don't have a friend who can help you. Or even if you do have a friend who can help you, but you're like, I want her to tell me something. So here are the high level steps of how you do this. The first thing I want you to do is you have to think of what it is, right? We said that awareness is the first step. So what is the biggest fear or belief that's holding you back from being who you want to be, or taking action or showing up the way that you want to show up? And I gave some examples of how that looked for me. So what is that for you? Go ahead and take a moment now and pause the podcast. Think about what that is for you. All right, I hope you actually paused it or have something in mind, because the next step is that I want you to now imagine if you didn't have that belief. Imagine instead that you have a more empowering one, maybe even the opposite of that belief. Just put yourself into that zone of imagination and pretending that you don't have that. And now, from that space, I want you to look at that specific thing about yourself that you just said, specific fear, limiting belief. And I want you to look at yourself from this new lens, from this different perspective of someone who doesn't have that belief. I want you to think about, how would you show up differently if you didn't have this belief? How would you actually maybe even benefit people because you do have the quality that you have, that you do have the past that you have, that you do have the experiences that you've had? And now that you've thought of this, and you can see how you actually are benefiting others, how you're showing up more congruently, how you're able to bring something forward, I want you to write that down. Write down all of the amazing things that actually are a strength because of what you've gone through, because of how you are, because of how you show up. And own it. I want you to look at that every day if you need to, multiple times a day, so that you can start to visualize, you see that, you tell that to yourself, and start acting as if you are that person. Anytime you start feeling otherwise, anytime some doubt starts to creep in for you, I want you to have that so you can pull it out, whether it's on your phone or on a sticky note on your desk, and you're able to look at it and remind yourself of all of the value that you bring. So again, the first step is to figure out what that belief is, or what that fear is that you have. What is it? What is it based on? Then imagine if you didn't have that anymore. Imagine that you were a person who doesn't have that belief or thought anymore. And then view yourself from that lens. View that same quality, that same belief, that same fear from the lens of someone who doesn't have it. And now that you're looking at it from that perspective, start writing down all of the things that that are actually of benefit, of how you would show up differently, how you would actually be able to impact others because of this quality that you have. Writing that down and then having it somewhere where you can look at on a daily basis to remind you anytime that you're feeling the opposite, that you're actually an incredible human being and you have so many more gifts than you give yourself credit for. Own that. Own it. So, sometimes people may wonder, well, what if it's something that I can't change about myself, or that I wish were different? I really want you to do this exercise and make sure that you're really imagining a life where you don't have that thing, because you may really change your perspective once you're able to look at it from a different angle. Does that make sense? Like, have you ever been talking to somebody and they're telling you something and you're like, wow, the solution is so obvious to me, but they can't see it because they're literally in their problem. And that happens to all of us when we're in the middle of the problem, in the middle of the baggage, and just thinking of those things. We can't see a different perspective. And so what this will do is help you get out of that perspective, even if just for a little bit, so that you can start to actually see how this is not the only way to look at things. It's giving you a way to see more options, more possibilities, and it can work in so many different contexts. And I recently worked with somebody who they were in an environment where they were the only person of their gender and surrounded by all of the opposite gender. And they saw this as a weakness, huge weakness. And after we did release work, we actually did do a breakthrough session. And as a part of that, that completely went away and the languaging changed so much. This person started talking about how it was actually a benefit to the team that they had somebody of the opposite gender there to speak and give a different perspective. It was just an amazing and incredible thing to watch, to see somebody really owning that. And the only thing that changed was a belief. That's it. That's how powerful this work is. So I invite you to do this process, to take it seriously, to give yourself, this shouldn't take more than like 10 or 15 minutes, maybe even less. And give it a go. And like I said, if you have a hard time coming up with a reframe, I'll be happy to talk with you about it, to, just send an email with what it is and we'll figure it out for you. I hope you guys have really enjoyed this journey of how to take a weakness and turn it into a strength. And I can't wait to see you guys for the next one. Have a great rest of your day. Okay, bye.